everybody, and welcome to the Business Success Network and Magazine podcast. It is Stacey Calder who founded this. Crikey, it's been going for so long now that I forget how long we've been on a podcast, but it's got to be a fair few years now. And I'm really excited because during that time, we've had some amazing business owners. We've had some fantastic decision makers, but we have never had this guest yet. So Michael Cox is joining me. I don't know what we're going to talk about because normally I have a structure and it's all about business success and things like that. But with Michael, it's like we've got so much we can talk about. In fact, I did say to him, do we talk about politics? Do we not? Do we talk? There's just so much. So I'm gonna welcome Michael into the podcast. Welcome. I was sitting here when you mentioned Gen Z the other day. I was like, does this make you the youngest guest we've had on the podcast? Don't know. So we were just saying backstage in the green room, wherever you like. I think we met while you were at uni.
Yeah.
You'd got this speaker's corner going and you wanted to promote it and publicize it. And so I'm guessing you've done a lot of public speaking since then. You've really kind of honed your craft. So do you want to just give a bit of an introduction into who you are, why you think I've dragged you on today, and what we're going to talk about?
Of course. No, thank you, Stacey, so much. So my name is Michael Cox. I'm 23. I'm a graduate from Durham University. And I suppose what makes me is all of the mad and crazy things that I end up doing, whether it's working with our town twinning association in Leamington Spa, liaising with the Mayor of France and the Mayor of Rousseau in France, which is our twin town, or doing lots of public speaking stuff, helping to really coach people in the art of the oratorical skill, and generally just getting out there and doing lots more other things, including politics. So I'm well-rounded, I think it's fair to say. There's always a sense that my diary and life are governed by the number of pies that I've got my fingers in all the plates that I'm spinning, but it's all very interesting and enjoyable.
And obviously, we've just had the general election, which your diary would have been so busy because you were kind of campaign managing and all that kind of thing. Is that something that you got into at uni and you kind of found a love for it? Or was it always intentional that you were going to go into politics? You're just such a busy person that I know a few weeks ago I would never have been able to get you on the podcast. You've got so much going on. So, yeah, is it something you've always wanted to do?
No, I think I've always loved the idea of it, and I'm quite a sad individual in some regards. I remember watching PMQ's Prime Minister's Question Time on the BBC when it was on at every 12 o'clock instalment on the Wednesdays. I initially wanted to become a judge. I was very keen on the idea of Michael Cox a la Rumpole or Rumpole the Bailey, really embracing that kind of Sermon on the Mount style of career. And then he was diplomat, and I think it was quite interesting one because I thought, oh, I'd love to be a diplomat. Traveling sounds great, doing lots of really cool things around policy and talking to lots of people, all the things that would float my boat. But I realised pretty early on this probably won't work too well because I've got too many opinions. I've got too many conviction in those opinions. I don't want to rub anybody up, the wrong way and cause World War III whilst I'm at it. So I think politics has found me, and I definitely have sought it out off my bat, I think. I mean, when we drove, so obviously I went to Durham, as I was saying earlier, and when we drove up that kind of 3.5 hour drive, where you normally kind of have your goodbyes and maybe share memories, I was on my phone scrolling through all the Tory candidates to see who I could help out with because the 2019 election was coming, whether we liked it or not. And I think, yeah, it's found me and I've loved it. And I've definitely been very much stuck in, whether it's been when I was working up in the north or working here locally in Warwickshire.
That's amazing. And I think I love what you said about, you're very opinionated. And I think politics is great for that. And I think it can also be quite nerve-wracking for people as well. So I've definitely, through my experience of politics, which isn't as much as you, I've ran a couple of times at local levels and things like that. But what I found was, and I think this is how we connected, those local sort of student associations are brilliant for getting young people involved in politics. They've really giving them their eyes open to it and to those experiences. And that then helps, obviously, local candidates, local MPs, things like that, to kind of really get their message out there. So I think that's how we definitely came across each other. And obviously, we've talked more about public speaking, and you're very passionate about that. Do you think that's, I mean, it's a skill, it definitely in itself. I run conferences and things where, we have a number of speakers. It's not a bad skill to have, is it? Whether it's politics, whether it's business, it's something that everybody needs to be able to do, right? So what is it you do? How do you coach people with that? How do you make them feel at ease and confident in what they're saying?
Cool. So I suppose it's worth going back slightly to work out why I was doing public speaking in the first place. And I went to Warwick School, which is a local school where we both are. And I was asked to do this vote of thanks for a chap called Satoe, being prisoner of war, having to go into really quite scary, conflict-ridden situations and try and do some mediation around those occurrences. And so I was doing this vote of thanks, and apparently it was all right because the president of the Leamington Smile Speakers Club, which is one club amongst a whole load of others, kind of grabbed me, got a husband who works at the school to get me over to a speakers club, and I just kind of started to do what I was doing then. So we've got clubs across the country. We call the Association of Speakers Clubs, and what we do is we basically, wherever somebody is, because a lot of people who come to the club meetings from across the country have got some experience of public speaking before. They're not totally new to this, but some of them are. And I think it's about that equalizing that level playing field. So whatever you've done in the past, you kind of go through what we call assignments, where we're looking really into the nuts and bolts of what makes a fantastic speaker. So how you connect with an audience, how you build that rapport, what kind of things do you use in speaking, be it humor, gestures, really going back to basics. And that kind of acts as a springboard. So once you've done about 9 of these, you then come to do what we call the number 10, colloquially. And that's really kind of summation, a compilation of all of your greatest hits as a speaker. And 9 times out of 10, it goes really well, and everyone's very happy. And it's proof in the pudding, really, and it's great to watch. But yeah, I think what we do is we basically take a very literal view, but I think it's the crucial bit. We do it in a very careful, compassionate, and loving way. What I love about our clubs is they're like mini communities, and the way in which we kind of increase personal development, we upskill, but do it in a very safe space is so crucial, because this is such a scary thing to do. I mean, I think it's like one of the massive public fears that people have got. It's way up that list above pigeons and heights and spiders and things. It really puts the fear of God into people, and so you've got to have that kind of safe environment for people to grow and thrive and flourish within, because if you don't, they just don't come back. And that's not only bad for us as a club because we've lost a budding member, but also it sets them back in their kind of speaking career so much. As soon as you take that confidence hit, once you put yourself out there, it's so much harder to build back and recuperate oneself and go through it again.
Absolutely. Yes, I definitely agree. I was talking to a business mentor and a speaker only probably last week before, and they were actually sharing their experience. They are one of the number 1 speakers in the UK now, but they were saying you can only learn to be that by, going, learning the craft, repeat. And he said there will be times where you will, and he has, not engaged with the audience, something just wasn't right, that fear of, and he often quite says, to be a public speaker, actually you've almost got to be slightly insane, because to go up there and put yourself out there, especially if you've already died a death, as he said, on stage, to then get back and carry on and go, okay, that was a learning curve. It takes something, and that you've got to keep building your confidence. So yes.
No,
I do.
it absolutely is bonkers. It's bonkers that we actually take pleasure and we enjoy this as a hobby. I honestly think that some people think we must be crackers, but that's a testament to what we're creating. And what we're creating is this kind of family sense of community. Because everybody's got to do this now. It is so important to be able to do. I think particularly post-pandemic. So we obviously had that kind of really weird and crazy bit where everybody was having to do public speaking, but in a very different way on kind of Teams and Zoom, and that those words became part of our lexicon for life.
I have to say, I think Teams is now a
Overnight.
swear word to me. I'll be really honest. Zoom is fine, but Teams, yeah.
It was mad. And suddenly, out of nowhere, not only are people having to change the way they communicate at those meetings in those offices, those virtual offices, but we had to completely change our model because we were literally putting a group of people in a room with a lectern at the front of the room in person. And so we had to kind of rewrite the manual. Rewrote the manual to speak online. I don't think, I mean, obviously some people will be doing this, and there are always people out there who get onto these things miles and light years ahead of everybody else and really kind of make them their own and master them. But for us, as our kind of quite amateur budding association, this was crazy because we had to kind of literally start afresh. But I'm really proud of the work we did, because what we kind of created was this idea of taking our guide, taking our assignments and doing them online. And loads of things change. The key things are, how do you occupy this box? So this box governs you. It's how you can create impact and deliver conviction on a box amongst a whole bunch of other boxes is really quite difficult. And it's a completely different skill set to being able to work a room, right?
Absolutely.
So
You can go and light up a room, you can go and engage with people face to face. But actually, if you're speaking to 20, 30 boxes, and let's face it, you've got other kind of challenges. People might turn their camera off, all those kinds of things, that actually, it is a skill. And even, the tech behind it. I said to you earlier, someone does all my tech stuff, but, I just sit here and waffle on to guests and let them get on with it. But there, the tech side of it is a challenge to some people. And I think COVID was a nightmare for some things. It was not great. But me and my husband were saying yesterday, I look back on it with some really great memories. And I think one of those was the online networking, the online speaker. Suddenly my business went from me networking quite locally, Warwickshire, kind of Coventry, to suddenly this whole of the UK and beyond. Suddenly my message, and I'm sure yours as well, could be heard with a much wider circle. So I think, for those people that adapted, like your speakers meeting, you've probably given them a whole new skill set now, not just around public speaking, but speaking online and everything as well. So
absolutely, and the two are complete different subsets of skills. I totally agree with what you were saying about this idea of this kind of extended community overnight. In my role, I've got to kind of go around clubs, and you kind of end up doing about maybe 10 if you're lucky over the year. But suddenly you're able to literally go to anywhere from this room. So I was in Perth, Edinburgh, whatever, and then also we had a whole bunch of people from Spain and the States, and Denmark and Sweden who were jumping on our calls, becoming members, because some of our clubs have actually stayed online. They believe that the offering they're doing is good enough, which I totally agree with. I've seen them in action, and it's great to have that of different speaking skills under our association label, because we really are being able to serve everybody who wants to do that sort of speaking wherever they are in the country, which is great.
Now, we talked a lot about speaking, but when I read your bio earlier, it mentions a communications consultants company. And so that made my ears prick up, because within our Business Success Network, we have what we call the 10 business pillars. And those are things like, you would imagine sales, marketing, health and wellness, because obviously if you're not well, your business isn't well. So there's 10 pillars. And one of those is communication. So communication, without it, businesses are going to struggle. We know that. It's one of our pillars that we work on. So obviously you've said that you've got a communication consultancy business. What does that look like? How do you help people? Who are your kind of ideal clients, if you like? If someone's listening to this thinking, aha, what is it you do?
I think I've used a very broad label deliberately because I end up doing lots of things that aren't quantifiable by one term, but essentially the business kind of provides political communications in the main. So we're working with different associations, conservative associations, and candidates up and down the country to advise them on how to win elections. Really, we're essentially ripping off I think Danny Finkelstein, Peter Mandelson podcast with the same name. But yeah, and it was well timed because I kind of got to a point where I thought, actually, just give this a go myself, and found some work quite quickly on to get stuck into, and be able to use the expertise that I've gained, which isn't obviously masses and masses, but I've got that kind of on the ground experience, and I know how these things tick and work, and it's been brilliant to be able to share that and work in that sec off my own back. But I think the reason why we use comms and not political comms is because I end up doing lots of other things as well, with
And
helping
that's,
people on their podcasts and stuff.
yeah, I was going to
Get the
say,
goes up and running.
you've got friends with podcasts. I've seen you've got colleagues and things that have got different avenues, and I think even when you niche down to one thing, you will still find people in other industries, in other markets, that say, hey, yeah, this is me and I want your services. So if you were to put political communications, I can see how that, people might go, oh, no, that's not what I'm looking for. But actually, when you start looking at what you do, the office manager stuff, the how to win this, what marketing stuff do they need? It is all communications, isn't it? And so, yeah, it's fascinating. I never thought I would do social media for political candidates, but I've done some of that. I never thought I would do social media for charities. And I don't, like you say, so I talk about visibility for all, but actually, they're two kind of niches that I could and have niched down into, but would turn others off had I said, hey, I do social media for politics or for charities. I still want the small businesses to come in and say, it's okay, we can use Stacey. So
Yeah, I mean, that you kind of hit the nail on the head, because what I like to think, I do, whether it's getting the InDesign out and doing loads of graphic design overnight, and it takes forever, and it's really fun, and we produce great stuff. That skill set is so transferable. It can work with whoever wants that kind of services, and it's been great to help out with charities, with other people's podcasts, and of course the politics stuff as well. So lots of different things, but all under one roof.
yeah, you've certainly got your fingers in a lot of pies, all under that umbrella, though, which I love. Now, we did mention earlier generations, and I mentioned that we'd probably known each other since uni. And when I first asked you to be on the podcast, I said, what are we going to talk about? And you mentioned Gen Z and jobs and careers and things like that. And it's been really interesting to hear your kind of career and what you've got going on. But what is it that makes you passionate then about Gen Z and jobs and things like this? Because I think, well, I'm a millennial, and you were laughing at me earlier because I'm actually a geriatric millennial, as somebody told me the other week, which I was really angry about because I don't want to be told I'm old. But then I read the description and thought, that is me. They are very well at describing each generation. So you are Gen Z, obviously. My daughter, who's 16, has just told me she's just in the Gen Z category as well. It's not something, and I don't know if this is a millennial thing or it's not something I've took a massive amount of time to look at the different generations and the categories. But obviously, I think with younger generations, they are very much at the forefront of a lot of things. I see these quizzes and these tasks and different stuff going on. So when you said, let's talk about jobs and careers for Gen Z, I am here for this, but I am going to let you lead on it because I don't know. What is it? Do you think jobs are the way people work? They're massively different. Do you think it's bringing in a whole new skill set? I have to say, in terms of public speaking, I think your generation are cottoning on to this much quicker than my generation did. We're kind of the older ones that are realizing that to have a voice is great. You guys have got that voice already.
Yeah, I think it's probably best summed up by looking at two sides of the same coin, because we've got an awful lot going for Gen Z at the moment. To see flexibility, actually, all the stuff, the post-COVID stuff around the hybrid workplace works really well for everybody, but particularly, I think, our lot who are juggling lots of different things in an increasingly uncertain world, and to be able to have that flexibility around literally where you work and the environment in which you're completing tasks and getting on with life is brilliant. I do think, though, that we are in a much more fragile time. I think we've got a lot of issues that I don't think we've quite cracked. If anything, we're just beginning to identify them. And if you look at the pandemic and what that kind of left behind in its wake, obviously we know about the vaccines, we know about care homes, we know about all that sort of stuff at a national level. But I think the one thing that we did forget was young people. And I think particularly students. I mean, I heard awful stories from friends who had either kind of recently graduated and suddenly found themselves alone in kind of one-bed apartments in London, unable to go outside because in the initial lockdown, it was kind of a big no to do anything. And the mental health problems that has created are immense. And I don't think we've even begun to do any of the catch-up work to address them yet. And if you look at somebody who's going into a graduate role now, what was kind of a representative of stability and assurance, there's a very archetypal common route to this sort of thing. You do your second year internship whilst you're at your university, you spend your first term of third year getting through the graduate test, and then you leave university, hopefully with the grade you wanted and a job waiting for you. And so I think that's why it was so shocking when Deloitte, I think early this year or the end of last year, got rid of a load of graduate positions. So these were people who had come into the business for maybe a year, maybe 6 months, very, very early on, expected to have this kind of brilliant career at Deloitte and were gone. And so you've got people who've gone, from all kind of walks of life, from all over the country, getting a London tenancy agreement. Well done them. It's very difficult to do so, and then find themselves out of a job in what should be one of the safest jobs going. So there's a lot of problems around, I think, security, well-being, sense of self and identity. How do you find your authentic self in a sea of inauthenticity where nobody could quite work out who they are, what they want to do with their time and their lives? I think if we want to address this stuff, we've got to get a much stronger position on mental health within universities, within institutions. I remember writing something a while ago during the pandemic where I couldn't quite get my head around why workplaces were going above and beyond to ensure that their employees had a safe space, that they were being looked after, that they were being treated with compassion and with care and attention. And yet in universities where we were all paying our fair share into the system, there just seemed to be an absence of that kind of responsive duty and diligence that we saw in the workplace. And I thought that was a bit odd. So
and I have heard some horror stories. I've heard some horror stories from students that, they'd paid all their tuition fees, they'd done everything else, they'd moved across the country, and then suddenly lockdown happened. They didn't really know the lessons weren't being taught. There was lots of other things going on. And I think, you've got to be of strong character to come out of that completely unfazed, I think. And I think you're right. I think there was lots of not just students, and actually younger students. So we homeschooled, we'd got a whole, and people were saying to me, crikey, you're really strict. You've got your kids around the table doing home learning, like actual school time. And I said, yeah, because if I don't, they're going to run riot in a house. It will be feral. And, then I want to keep some stability and some normality. Now, when you're a student, you're at uni, that's almost on you. You've not got your parents or your tutors around to say, be really structured, do this, how are you doing? So I can imagine it must have been a very lonely time for students to suddenly go from a very social kind of time of their life to not being, allowed out in a bar or, study groups, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think another concern would be when you're carrying all that, in some cases it would have been trauma. It would have been absolutely, it would have been trauma. And when you're carrying all of that anxiety, that trauma, and then in a year's time, i.e., now and last year, right now go and get a job. I mean, there's this throwing yourself into the deep end, and then there's this, and it's staggering because, as I said, the job market is not playing nicely with us at the moment with graduates. We're having to go against the grain. I think the way we are learning, the way we are pursuing subjects and passions, I think is difficult because, if you're going into law and you want to be a barrister, obviously people will get those jobs, but it's going to be very difficult because you're literally competing against so many different age groups. You're competing against the ones who were in the mix, just before you, the ones who were above them, who've done a bit of experience, taken some time off, and this kind of these hurdles were immense.
It seems like there's a lot more candidates now for a lot less positions.
Yeah, I mean, essentially that's it, because we're not, although there are vacancies, we're being particularly picky, which I
Yes.
don't think we're treating people again with that kind of dignity. I saw on Twitter the other day, just as a quick snapshot, this woman was applying for a job at Cafe Nero as a team leader. She got 5 years of working as a barista as a team leader. She got working as a barista for 5 years. She got 2 years working as a team leader doing that exact role. She got great references. She got brilliant expertise. She didn't even get an interview. She got the standard copy. You're
Wow.
not successful, and you think, what's going on there? Because that's really quite odd.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit like, I think, talking to people and listen to people, that you can do so much, and yet you can still face that brick wall. And I suppose the thing I've learned in as a graduate doing what I do and talk to people and obviously speaking, is that I think the key message would be, you can't go for one thing anymore. We have to be so much more flexible with the opportunities that we seek, because if we don't do that, we're narrowing ourselves off so much that we're not going to become successful and do what we want. And I heard a great thing the other day, which was, let's say you're training as a dentist and you want to become a dentist, but at the moment things aren't going too well, and you're ending up as a perfume seller, not in a kind of a shop, but in a shopping centre, one of those little stands. And it was actually Philippa Perry. So Philippa Perry, Grayson Perry's wife, some brilliant work in the mental health space and the psychology, and particularly child psychology as well. And Philippa basically said, if you're this perfume seller, you're probably going to hate your job. You're probably going to be thinking every single day you go to work, I want to be a dentist. This is beneath me. I've got a master's. I've got a doctorate, maybe. I've got an undergraduate degree. I've got all this tuition fees that I've spent, big student loans. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And Philippa says, ignore all of that. Become the best perfume seller you can be. Go out there, find the perfumes, learn everything there is to learn about the scents, about the different bottles, about the different brands, and have those conversations with your customer base. Talk to them about the perfume, talk to them about all the things you've learned. And if you do that, if you really commit, you will enjoy it eventually. And this woman, the woman that she was coaching through, and she then went on to dentistry in her own time. I think the point is, we've got lots of obstacles. There's no natural rhythm anymore. We're being pulled in lots of different directions. And if you can find some form of stability, whether it's perfume selling or baristaing or whatever, or a research project, or taking some time off, take the time, work out, recalibrate, refresh, and then come back, because these jobs, although the market is tricky now, it won't always be as tricky then and now in the future.
That's amazing. So I was saying when we started, I normally ask people for, what's their top tip for business, but I think you've just given us quite a few tips for, graduates and for Gen Z that are looking for roles. When you said about the CV there for the barista, I I can completely I get that, because I very long time ago in a previous life was running a coffee shop a very long time ago, like you say, to get you through college, to get you through all those kinds of things. And the industry back then, hospitality, it was where everybody went to get those jobs, to get that experience. And if that person has that and they're not even getting, their CV's been read and they're not even getting that interview, that is quite shocking. So thank you for that. What would be then your top tips for your generation, for Gen Z, if they are out there at the minute looking for a role? What would be your
I
number
think
one takeaway?
I think number one takeaway is cast the net wide open. Don't have tunnel vision on any one role, sector, or opportunity, because you're limiting yourself off. We have so much going for us. We are doing so much more than before. Whether it's society stuff, charity work, whatever. People just seem to be doing a hell of a lot more, which is fantastic to see. So just go for everything. Look at everything up. Don't be afraid to pick things that might seem a bit random and bizarre, a bit crazy. Embrace all of that, and this is not a race. There is no urgency around this. Of course, we've all got to get jobs. We've got to get money coming in the bank, but you are not saddling yourself up to a career in whatever it might be from day one in year one of leaving university. And it's the same thing about we did our A levels. Those subjects are not going to haunt you for the rest of your life. It's okay to take a step back and change your mind. And I think people our employers understand that. Employers understand that they might get a candidate who's done, let's say, a psychology degree applying for, I don't know, a role that might not necessarily suit that kind of archetypal stuff that we've always been taught. And history students aren't always going to be history teachers, or all be working in museums, or they might end up being in sales. Cast the net open, look for all opportunities. Nothing is a bonkers idea. Just go for it.
Love that. Nothing is a bonkers idea. And what about to those employers then, those business owners that are, they're recruiting at the minute? What would you say to them? What's your top tip or your message to them regarding recruiting Gen Z?
I could understand how difficult it must be to have thousands and thousands potentially of applicants for one role, and nobody is going to get like a tailor-made response. I think it would be, kindness, overarching kindness in everything that you do. The onboarding, recruiting is always going to be difficult. This is not a mode. This is not a massive go at every employer in the country. But that onboarding, the care, the attention, creating the support network, everything that happens in those first few months is crucial. And it'd be helpful for you, right? Much more likely to retain your employees, much less likely for them to get scouted and leave you. You can put in that time, you can put in that development and personal growth into them, and you will get the benefits and the dividends that inevitably arise from doing so. So kindness, always good. And creating that safe space.
I think that is a brilliant place to leave it on. I said we'd do around half an hour. We've been talking for about 35 minutes now, but I think we can always end with a bit of kindness, can't we? I think that's what should make the world go round. Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Can you just tell everybody before you go, where is the best place for them to connect with you? Where can they find out more?
LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know what the username is. I'm not very good at being Gen Z half the time either. But no, if you search Michael Cox and find the funky hair, you'll be all right.
I love that. Search Michael Cox and find the funky hair. I have to say, you were more doing your hair today. For those of you watching on YouTube, he was definitely sorting out his hair before we came on. For those of you that are on Apple or audio, you just have to go over to YouTube and find it now just to look at the funky hair. So go over to LinkedIn, go and find Michael Cox. It's always full of fantastic stories. Go and ask him more about his speaking and things like that. Or if you're interested in his communications company, then do go and check him out. Michael, what's next?
What's next? I think I'm going to have some time. It's been a very busy few weeks, and I think I'm going to go on holiday. I'm going to take a well-earned break, and I'm going to come back fighting, ready for the next chapter.
Brilliant. Well, have a G&T for me, please.
Of course.
Oh, amazing. Folks, this has been the Business Success Network and Magazine podcast. If you've loved this, please do subscribe. Do head over to our Facebook community. Just search Business Success Network UK and come and network with a lot of small businesses within the UK who champion each other's visibility and just want to see everybody succeed. Thank you very much.